Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello, Internet. I'm excited. When am I not excited when I speak to you? But this is a story so remarkable that a movie should be made about it, and I hope it will be in the future. I know definitely there's a book being written by the man who's going to tell the story to you. And once that book is out, of course, we would definitely invite him back to speak to us about the book as well. And it's a paratrooper and it's a Norris Crooks holder, John Parkin. And he rescued a downed pilot, the Impala pilot, I think in 1979. And it was such a story that I'm still sitting here in awe. John, very welcome here. Thank you, mate. I appreciate you. Thank you for being patient. I had to take Rebecca somewhere and the man was very patient. He said, no problem, Koos, I'll wait a bit. And then and now we're here, now we're going to record it. John, over to you. Please tell me where you come from, what happened. I'm keeping quiet.
Thank you very much, Chris. I, without going back too far in history, obviously did my schooling, Marist Brothers in Port Elizabeth, finishing in Johannesburg, and received my call up to go to 6th South African Infantry, a July intake, and from there we went to Grahamstown. I was in Grahamstown for, I think it was roughly 2 weeks, and these gentlemen from Parachute Battalion, James Hills, Herbie Poss, and Gavin Caddick, arrived to do parachute selection, and I thought, this is really where I want to be. Needless to say, we got on the trail, passed the tests, the few tests that we had to do, and then got on the train. I would imagine it was the next day or two, and off to Bloemfontein. And I then joined B Company, 1977, and started doing my basics with Major Hills as our company commander. I was there for 3 months when we were selected to go to infantry school and to do leader training in Oudtshoorn. We left for Oudtshoorn, myself and a whole lot of guys, and I spent another 9 months at Oudtshoorn. I think 2.5 months of that was spent at a place called Ivali doing operational stuff. But we did our whole infantry school training, and as a result of that, I became a second lieutenant. And I then was asked to stay behind as one of the 18 students that were going to stay behind as the leader group. And I did not want to stay behind. I made a point of trying to see a Commandant Holzhausen, who was the second in command and also a paratrooper. And I said, please, sir, I need to go back to Parachute Battalion. And he pulled a few strings and I was off on my way to Parachute Battalion, where I then found myself with my then own troops from the July 1978 intake. And I was allocated to Echo Company under the command of Major Leon Groenewald. As a Green Beret coming from infantry school, I gave my troops basic training, and then I joined them as a Green Beret on the PD course. And we did all the PD course, did the training, and did the hangar training, 3 weeks of hangar training, and I got my Maroon Beret with my troops. And from there, we continued doing conventional training and counterinsurgency until June of 1979. And on the 7th of June, we left for the operational area. My talk today is predominantly as Koos has mentioned, it's going to be the recollections of a personal real-life drama. I've been badgered for nearly 35 years to tell my story of the rescue of a downed pilot in an enemy base. And after being pressurized by many fellow soldiers, veterans, I put pen to paper. So just to give a little bit of background, the recollections are of a real-life drama that played itself out in a dangerous war situation that took place in the late 70s in Southern Africa, more specifically Angola. Firstly, I must just give a brief background of the situation in South Africa those many years ago. Without going into the politics of the day, which most of you will no doubt remember, South Africa had also become involved with the Cold War taking place in the world, more specifically in Southern Africa at that time, which affected us. The South African Border War, as it became known, was a war fought against Russia, Angola, and Cuba, who were the driving forces of the communism bus in Africa and the colonies of Southern Africa. Southwest Africa, as it was known then, now Namibia, was administered by South Africa under the Treaty of Versailles from as early as the First World War. SWAPO, or Southwest African People's Organization, a terrorist grouping funded by the Russians and the Cubans, were fighting for the independence of Namibia. Operating out of Angola with the assistance of Russian and Cuban-backed forces, SWAPO were trying their best to infiltrate and introduce communism to the Namibian populace using guerrilla tactics. Southwest Africa, as most of you know, is a large country with only 2 million people today, and the northern border roughly 800 kilometers long. The terrain is extremely sandy, has very little infrastructure, if any. A huge military force was established to perform this function. Everything had to come from South Africa, some 2,000 kilometers away. The operational area, as it became known, was established to prevent the infiltration along the northern border between Southwest Africa and Angola, with a variety of bases being established. As a result of these continuous incursions, conscription became the order of the day in South Africa in the 70s and the 80s. All 18-year-olds were called up to serve in the military. I was called up to Parachute Battalion, where I did my basic training before being selected for leader training. I then obviously became a second lieutenant, did my PD course and my parachute jump course, and then trained my troops for conventional and guerrilla warfare in Bloemfontein. On completion, we proceeded to the operational area, carrying out tasks relative to our airborne taskings and the war effort, as determined by Sector 10. Over the next year, various airborne and heliborne operations, rescue and fire force tasks were executed, with one specific incident being the one I will tell you of today. My Honoris Crux Bravery Award, 45 years ago, and as I look at the watch, it's literally 45 years. It was the 18th of October in 1979. As a 19-year-old paratrooper, I've tried to make this talk as interactive as possible, with slides and video clips to give you a better understanding and feeling of what our experiences were. With all the renditions received from the various parties involved with the rescue over the past 40 years, I will try and paint an accurate picture of what actually transpired those 45 years ago. Unfortunately, some of the people have passed on, so I've taken whatever I could get, the renditions of the pilot we rescued, the pilots of the 2 choppers, the pilots of the Impalas, everybody that had some sort of input into the operation. I've had them all give me a rendition as they saw it. And out of that, probably took me the best part of a year to get all the information and put this all together in some sort of legible fashion. And with that in mind, I'm now going to try and give you the story as it actually happened. We start off with our military home base at Ondangwa, Southwest Africa. Ondangwa was historically the home base for one parachute battalion, and all the companies operated out of that. We were E Company, we took over from Delta Company. It's roughly in the middle of the operational area, as will be reflected on one of the maps, and was the Air Force's main operational base. Almost all of their operations were executed from here, whether they were trooping movements, reconnaissance, fighter jets, helicopters, or just plain surveillance. October is red hot in Novemberland, with no escaping the heat. 36 to 45 degrees most days. As paratroopers, more commonly known as parabats, we were based here along with the Air Force. The base was in a white sand quadrangle comprising 20 canvas tents, housing the leader group, troops, kitchen, mess, and ops rooms tents. We also had a swimming pool, and of course the quadrangle doubled as a parade ground and volleyball court. It was surrounded by sand walls with fortified bunkers and a mortar pit in the event of enemy attack. The canvas tents are merely a physical covering, nothing more. Base life was boring to say the least, always hoping for some sort of action, anything or whatever to just pass the time. We passed the time by weapons training, map reading, volleyball, swimming, and of course, our well-known 8-kilometer runs around the runway perimeter every afternoon. Super fit that we were. What did one parachute battalion do at Ondangwa Air Force Base? We had three main functions. Airborne assault operations, either by parachute or helicopter insertion, mostly into Angola, either to attack enemy bases or perform area patrols, searching out the enemy. We were also the advance party to Operation Smoke Shell in June 1980, walking the 85 kilometers to the helicopter administration area for what would turn out to be the first full-on and successful mechanized battle of the war at that time. And I would imagine that was the forerunner to 6-1 Mech Group. A reaction force for any ground forces in trouble. Rapid response to enemy spoor found by the forces on the ground that required follow-ups and immediate support to ground forces operating in given areas. Last but not least was to act as rescue for the South African Air Force pilots and planes that either got themselves into trouble or were shot down and needed to be recovered. On one of the slides, I show Echo Company 7880 walking on Wimvili Sapot, south of the border cut line. That was on our way into Smoke Shell. The bottom picture is Falk 2 at Smoke Shell. An interesting note in this picture, there are 4 HC recipients in this photo taken at Smoke Shell 1980. Brian Gibson was unfortunately not there. He was in hospital at that stage. And for the love of me, I can't remember what Brian Southey was doing. What transpired on that late afternoon of the 18th October, 1979? And who were the players involved in the rescue of the downed pilot? Aubrey Bell, the downed pilot, a 35-year-old reserve force pilot with 2 kids, qualified as an architect, flying his Impala, tail number 1033. Gip Vermeulen, his wingman. Stein Venter, the OCF 4 Squadron, and Cliffy Reynolds were Impala pilots on search and rescue that afternoon. Pilots Hugh Payne and Keith Dell in the lead Puma helicopter, with a stick of 6 paratroopers commanded by fellow Lieutenant Errol Bredenkamp, tasked with the actual rescue of Aubrey Bell. Pilots Paula Kruger, Nick Lithgow, and our Flight Sergeant Sig Hubel. Our Puma helicopter, tail number 149, modified as a gunship variant with a 5.0 heavy caliber machine gun, protruding from the starboard door. Flying with doors open as we were accustomed to, with a stick of 6 paratroopers comprising myself as the commander of the second stick, Assie De Lange, Neil McNamara, Brian Gibson, Brian Southey, and Ben Maria. An operational map of the Omapanda area. I'm going to try and outline the area in question. Omapanda was 20 kilometers south of Ondangwa, our enemy's version of Ondangwa, and the whole area was a network of terrorist camps. It was their frontline logistics setup, an overnight camp for terrorists moving in and out of Ovambaland, northern Southwest Africa. The South African Air Force's mission was to look for enemy vehicles and troop movements in the Shied, Kwamatu, and Ondangwa triangle at that specific time. Steyn, the OC, had warned Bell and Vermeulen that the area was well protected by enemy anti-aircraft artillery, especially the Omapanda area. I will reference Otto Scher shortly. After their briefing, Steyn and Reynolds were put on search and rescue for the rest of the afternoon. Bell and Vermeulen took off on their reconnaissance mission. Both the Paras and the Air Force, we relaxed around our respective pools. The Air Force using a portable Becker VHF radio, placed within earshot should anything transpire. 2 sticks of 6 Paras remained clothed on standby for any eventuality, as was customary, waiting for the siren to sound any emergency. I show a photo of a Mirage 3 R2Z and give a bit of background to our rescue. Before outlining this story, I want to regale the forerunner to our rescue. On the 6th of July, 1979, 3 months earlier, a 2-squadron Mirage 3 pilot, tail number 856, flown by Captain Otto Scher, was doing a post-strike damage assessment photographic run of Omapanda at 600 knots and 190 feet above the ground, on a base approximately 40 kilometers in Angola, 20 kilometers south of Ondangwa, when he was struck by anti-aircraft fire that caused total electrical failure. Passing 8,000 feet and at a speed of 500 knots, his Mirage flicked into a high G right-hand descending spiral, from which he could not recover. He ejected and evaded capture, and we successfully rescued him. As Otto says, the longest 2 hours and 17 minutes of his life. The arrival of the 2 Pumas and the sight of you guys securing the landing zone allowed me to break cover and run to the chopper. This will forever be etched in my memory. Our chopper pilot that day was Major Paula Kruger. I show a short video clip of a Impala in action in Angola. For those from overseas, it is also known as an Italian Ermachi MB326K.
The Impalas, or imps as they are referred to in ready room jargon, are certainly master of the skies over South Angola. When they take off, a strike is usually in the offing. This time it was a Russian T-34 tank on the outskirts of one of the Angolan towns in the interior where SWAPO had a presence.
Here is a short video clip of a 14.5 anti-aircraft gun, including sound effects of the gun that forced Otto and Aubrey to eject their planes. Mayday, mayday. Kip Vermeulen's voice broke the silence on the radio with his mayday, mayday call, reporting that Aubrey had ejected after being shot down. As Aubrey put it, he'd experienced radio problems while changing radio frequencies, flying too close to the Omapanda mission station, which should not have happened. His plane now on fire from 14.5 rounds, smoking and cockpit lights flashing. Kip shouted for him, eject, which he duly did. As the aircraft speed was more than 600 kilometers an hour, his helmet was ripped off his head, his revolver blown out of its holster, and being at a very low level, his parachute pendulumed once before hitting the ground with a massive forward vector. He blacked out momentarily before coming to and realizing as he ran for cover that his ankle made a crushing noise. He realized he had broken his ankle, as well as having no feeling in his right arm from the fall. He hid under the first bush near the nearest tree line, next to an open shona, or pan, for those who don't know what a shona is. I have a photograph of the cut line, which shows the break between Southwest Africa and Angola. And if you look at the slightly lighter circular spots, that is a typical pan or shona. At this stage, Kip, who saw Aubrey's parachute deploy, sent out his mayday call. Aubrey, in the meantime, confirmed he was injured and that he could see a small truck on its way to look for him. Kip, with his second moment of terror, realized that there were manned trenches approximately 200 meters from Aubrey's position. He then immediately set about strafing the area, realizing a while later that his ammunition was running out. And as such, he then continued with low-level dummy runs on the vehicles until they came to a halt. Nick, our co-pilot, in the meantime was settling down for a snooze. And after playing some cards, when the radio crackled to life, standby crews to the ops room immediately. Get your maps, Nick, beckoned Paula, heading to this ops room. I recall this being a prefab structure about 50 meters away from the Parabats camp, part of the Air Force setup. I remember clearly how Errol Bredenkamp and I prepared for these types of events. Errol and I were roommates for most of our Army days together. We would be in our Fire Force kit in a jiffy. We had done this drill so many times, almost as fast as a tire change these days at an F1 race. Into the ops room we raced, notepads at the ready, and the news was, fighter pilot shot down at Omapanda. We had to go and fetch him. The mission had started. Our boredom was soon to turn into a harrowing experience. The siren sounded, and without any hesitation, both the Parabat and Air Force camps sprung to life. The co-pilots and flight engineers ran to the choppers and prepared for their startup procedures. Errol and I kitted up immediately, one immediately thinking of family and friends at home, thoughts running through our minds while collecting our Fire Force gear. What should we take with us? Maybe a sleeping bag, extra water, ammunition, as one didn't know if this would turn into an overnight operation. Errol and I headed to the Air Force ops room for the briefing. The two parasticks on standby similarly grabbed their kit and headed for the Pumas on the tarmac. The briefing was short and concise. We had to effect the recovery of a downed Impala pilot. Route calculations were calculated, quick and precise. Logistics worked out, fuel and distance-wise. What could go and who would go? That being said, with Platoon 2 on standby, the solution was simple. Only 5 paras and their commanders, plus the 3 Air Force crew in the Puma helicopters could go, times 2, one as the backup to the other. The gunship Puma waiting on the apron. After the quick briefing by the Air Force, Paula exited the ops room, bellowing to the co-pilots, engineers, and us 2 para commanders. Aubrey Bell has been shot over a Mopanda. Oh, hell, grunted Paula. I've never even heard of the place. It sounds as if he's landed close to the perimeter of the enemy base, his plane landing 500 meters away and starting a bushfire. Kip says there are vehicles from the camp heading towards the wreckage, so they don't know where Aubrey is at this stage, but it won't be long before they find him. Errol and I knew it was deep into Angola, and there was an immediate sense of concern. The stage was set, and off we ran to our respective choppers. A quick briefing to our lads, apprehensive glances at each other, but no words said. The task was at hand. Quick radio checks, and we were set. Everyone knew what to do. We were the backup to the other chopper. That is Errol's chopper. The smell of Puma helicopter avgas, thick in the air as engines spooled up, created a sense of nervousness of note. The atmosphere by now was electric, as by now it was known that the Bats and the Blue Jobs were off to collect a fighter pilot who had been shot down, who we all assumed was still alive. Deep into Angola he was. Time was now like gold. Lightning fast, we boarded the 2 Puma gunships, 6 Paras in each. The rotor blades were already turning. That sound, how many times I've heard that sound and experienced fire force. We were now in the zone. It was now adrenaline combined with fear and the need to survive. I had to survive this one too. You crap yourself, but off you go for flag and country, fellow soldier. I went to the front part of the chopper to get a pair of headsets from the flight engineer. I sat up front for these fire force and rescue missions, as I had to be connected by headset to stay in the loop. Once on board, I was now under the command of my pilot, and this would remain the case until I was back on terra firma. Errol and his 5 lads were in the lead chopper, while we followed behind in a taxi pattern. And then Paula took off. No running start this time, but immediately upward. The enormous power of the twin turbines lifting the Puma effortlessly into the Southwest African skies. And soon we were skimming along the treetops at over 200 kilometers per hour. I've just put up a slide showing the Aerospatiale SA330 Puma. The Puma is made in France. I'll continue with the story. Steyn and Reynolds, who were airborne by now, relieved Gip, who had exhausted his ammunition, and proceeded to 9,000 feet, where they were clear of enemy ground fire. Steyn, while waiting for the choppers to arrive, promptly set about trying to neutralize as many of the anti-aircraft positions he could. While he could see the smoke from the burning wreck, the parachute on the ground in the Shona, and the flashes of gunfire and RPGs coming from the trenches, he left Reynolds to keep an eye while he fetched the Pumas and directed them to the parachute position. Just a typical Puma on a mission with some paras in it. That is typically how we would fly. Hugh and Keith in the lead Puma, Paula and Nick in the second Puma, using the main road leading into Angola as a navigational aid, crossed the border and aimed directly for the base. which was spread over both sides of the road. The flight into the pickup zone remains a blur to this day because there's no chatting, only listening to the radio and watching. So one is completely tuned in and absolutely alert. My heart continued to race, and every now and again I would look at the back and give my lads a thumbs up, or they would do the same, or just stare out the door at the treetops or at each other. The journey, as always, in that heat and at that height, was bumpy, to say the least. I seem to recall we flew at treetop level the whole way. I can't remember how long the flight was. It felt like forever. Then there was a sudden development. As the pilot picked up the emergency PEL bar signal of the downed pilot, we were getting close now. Aubrey had now been on the ground for 53 minutes, hiding in a clump of trees and bushes. He'd obviously ejected very low and not been seen by the enemy who had been searching for him. Their focus was on the burning aeroplane. Thank goodness. The actions by his fellow Impala pilots in doing attacks and dummy runs on the base kept the enemy's heads down and, needless to say, lengthened the time finding him. In the lead chopper, things were getting rough. Keith called for smoke from Aubrey, who responded immediately. But by the time Aubrey had thrown the smoke, Hugh was going too fast and could not flare timeously to land, performing a go-around to avoid flying over the enemy trenches, who by now were firing on them frenetically. We crossed a line of trenches as we started coming in, and in the distance seeing soldiers running towards the parachute position. A funny noise sounding like pock, pock, pock over and above the rotating blade sound. I realized our chopper was taking small arms fire. Errol's heart in the meantime was racing as he signaled to his lads that it was time to get ready. The next thing Errol felt was the chopper lurching heavily upwards and right and climbing. They had overshot the pickup zone, and now in that instant, we had become the rescue chopper. I get goosebumps. Nick, our co-pilot's heart started racing as he saw the black plume of smoke from Aubrey's plane in the distance, sweat running down his face and chest. He called Gip, who by now was out of ammo and had little fuel, stating in an agitated voice, "They have left the plane and are now sweeping the bush towards the camp." His parachute is in a clearing 50 meters from the west side of the camp, but I can't see him. He must be hiding in the clearing, next to the clearing. I have to go now, or I won't make it. Go for it, guys. Paula, as cool as a cucumber, followed the needle pointing directly at Aubrey's emergency locator beacon, saying, "Nice one, Gip. See you in the pub." And with that, Gip was on his way back to base. Paula, with a little more time to flare, spotted Aubrey's parachute in the Shona, and under a massive barrage of rocket and gunfire, proceeded to land near the parachute. It's a slide of a Puma hovering as it comes in, as we would typically hover and jump out of the chopper. From the front of the chopper, Nick saw the parachute lying in the clearing. And as we got closer to the trench line, the trench line became much more apparent. What he next saw was horrifying. Streams of terrorists were running towards our side of the camp. They obviously realized we were going to land in the base. He heard strange sound of pock, pock, pock above the noise of the chopper and realized it was the bullets hitting the chopper. It was now getting so intense. Hovering about 6 feet from the ground, I insert a slide showing a typical Puma landing scene. The 6 of us paras immediately jumped out and formed into an extended line, proceeding to search for Aubrey from the closest tree line. Our hot extraction was about to start. On landing, a massive amount of firepower was brought to bear on the chopper and us on the ground. 14.5 anti-aircraft gun being used in a ground roll, rocket-propelled grenades, and AK-47 small arms fire was crazy. And then our chopper lifted and was dropped. Instead of it being silent, it was a horrific noise. The chopper lifted safely and exited low over the base, the crew seeing the enemy trenches littered everywhere. Luckily for the chopper crew, the enemy were completely disoriented and disorganized, but they had to come back and fetch us. We were on our own in this gunfight to see who would get to Aubrey first. On exiting the chopper, I immediately spotted a small jeep at the end of the Shona and immediately proceeded to get Brian, who exited at the 6 o'clock position on the far left, and Neil, who executed at 12 o'clock to position on the far right of an extended line, advancing towards the first line of bush and trees that we assumed he would be in, with Assie, the Langa, keeping an eye out for the jeep, which by now was around about 300 meters behind us. The first RPG started exploding around us, and Brian shouted out, "I've done a mortar course, but these are not mortars." As he neared the bush line, another RPG landed close to him, this time choosing to dive for cover rather than deciding what we are getting shot with. Overhead, 2 Impala fighter jets. I'll just show you a slide. The 2 Impala overhead continued suppressing the enemy fire on the trenches 200 meters from our position as we advanced in the tree line approximately 150 meters away. Amidst all this gunfire of the Impala above, buzzing in the trenches to keep the enemy heads down, Assie shouted he'd heard something, but it was Brian who had spotted Aubrey. On spotting Brian, Aubrey broke cover and hopped to us, nearly being shot by his friend, Brian Gibson, as he put it. Brian's first instinct being to shoot. I raised my rifle and then saw it was the pilot. I made a split-second decision and told him to wait there and I'll fetch the other guys. I had a feeling that if I carried him, he would slow me down and the guys would be searching and we'd lose time. We all gathered in the thicket, awaiting our ride back, all the while gunfire and exploding RPGs all around us, aircraft above us. It was unbelievable to be waiting in this thicket with the sounds of a war movie all around us. Only this was the real thing. With all this firing into the thicket, it is truly a miracle that not one of us were shot. Errol's chopper in the meantime was circling the base and listening on the radio should anything out of the ordinary happen. As Errol says, I could hear John and co. They were full and deeply in trouble on the ground, but that the extraction was at least happening. Talk of adrenaline. You can't explain this unless you've excreted it yourself. Our chopper on 4 to 6 occasions got hit by enemy fire. I was wondering how long we would stay up before a biggie hit us. Every time we got hit, it felt like a gust of wind had grabbed the chopper. I didn't wonder for too long, as the radio confirmed that John and his bats had the pilot, and that we could all head home south. My A-72 ground-to-air radio then took a bullet, and luckily Neil had the backup. I instructed Neil to call Paula back via the Staines Impala, as Paula's radio was not working too well. Paula, who by then had also done one circuit under heavy ground fire, approached the same way in as the drop-off. I include a slide of a Puma so that you can have the feel of the dust and the smoke created as a chopper comes in to fetch us. The dust created by the chopper and the smoke from our smoke grenades was dispersed by the chopper as it came in, giving us limited temporary cover. Thankfully, next states, as we approached the chute, I realized we had a serious problem. The firefight between the parabats and the enemy was taking place right over the area around the chute, and we had to land between them. The whole clearing was a cloud of dust and smoke caused by the chopper's downwash, and the smoke canisters thrown by the parabats to call us in. Rifle fire with flashes of tracer and smoke trails from rocket propelled guns crisscrossing in front of us. I looked at Paula, but he was ahead of me, his eyes searching for an alternative landing spot. There was none. The thick bush made sure of that. We had no choice but to take the hammering, so in we went. As we landed, the parabats came at us like lightning, running past us and forming a circle of defense between the enemy and the chopper. This was a masterstroke and indicated clear thinking under incredible pressure. The enemy must have thought the parabats were going to take them on in their own base, because a lot of them got up and ran away from the fight. Assi and Ben, using the fireman's lift method, carried Aubrey to the chopper as it descended to the DZ. The rest of us four, creating an all-round defense before all climbing aboard. This felt like a lifetime, and yet only all of 3 or 4 minutes must have elapsed. Sig pulled Aubrey aboard, and we all alighted. But it was not over yet. I include a slide of a Puma banking as we went out, and an RPG rocket launcher. As we took off and lifted, a whole lot of RPG rockets and small arms fire passed around and below the chopper, some exploding where we had been moments ago. We heard deeper and more ominous bangs as the anti-aircraft guns came online. Which way to go was the question on all our minds. Sig was trying to convince Paula, above the noise of the chopper and the shooting, that it would be dangerous to go right. Hugh in the other chopper, warning him not to go left. I show a slide of Sig Hubel firing on the trenches. I was looking over Sig's shoulder. I had not sat down at that stage while he fired the machine gun, indicating to him the outline of the trench lines on the left side as we lifted. 10 meters off the ground, the chopper took a sharp bank to the right. I lost sight of those enemy troops, only to see many more on the other side of the road at the edge of the Shona. 2 shots cracked through the cockpit. Paula's head whipped back as the cockpit was showered with splinters of glass. The nose dipped sharply, with the ground coming up fast. Nick grabbed the cyclic, pulling the nose up, missing the ground by a whisker, and shaving the leaves off the tall trees as the Puma lurched skywards. The Puma shuddering as it clawed for air. Paula, with a cut above his right eye, took back control of the chopper. The chopper jolted yet again before the shooting faded, and we flew clear of the camp. For a moment, as we lifted, it sounded like the world was coming to an end, with all the explosions, gunfire, and the noise of helicopter blades cutting through the air as it rapidly gained height. We cleared the base and left for home. Silence at last prevailed. No one spoke. Brian was seated at the rear of the chopper, and with the banking of the chopper, shots rattled through the floor between his legs, going through his left hip and arm, exiting out the starboard side tail panel. Sig, spotting the blood, jabbed Assie to indicate to me that Brian was wounded. As Brian says in his rendition, Lieutenant Parkin then started to give me first aid. No one had bandages, but I had 4 bomb bandages on with me that day, ironically. Lieutenant Parkin used 2 rifle magazines as splints and wrapped the bandages around my leg. The pain in my hip was excruciating, and I told Lieutenant Parkin that my backside is on fire. He cut my pants off and started stemming the blood flow with bandages. I raised my head to have a look, and he pushed my chest down so that I would stay lying on my back. When he finished, I realized I was lying in chopper fuel. I panicked a bit because I knew if we were delayed, I was going to be in pain for much longer. I asked Lieutenant Parkin if we were going to make it, and he thought we would. I can't remember receiving any painkiller injections, but I was told later that Lieutenant Parkin had squirted a few Sosagons, morphine as you will know it, injections into me. It certainly never helped. While lying there, the pain in my hip was becoming more unbearable. And I remember looking at the floor of the chopper and seeing the twisted metal caused by the 14.5 anti-aircraft rounds that had gone through the floor. I said to myself, it's the metal that's pricking you, Brian. That's why it's so painful. I moved my backside away, got a few seconds relief, and then the pain would start. The metal had nothing to do with my pain. Assie all the while keeping an eye on Aubrey. Sig, our flight engineer, concerned for the chopper's well-being, leant out the door after Hugh warned that fuel was pouring out of the chopper, looking like smoke in the Puma slipstream. After checking both engine and fuel tanks, he indicated his satisfaction that we were good to go as we headed to Oshakati to drop off our wounded, as by now it had become last light. Flying at no light in Angola with no reference is quite daunting. To sum up then, here is a map that was drawn by me and the company clerk in the Echo Company War Diary straight after the debriefing. Mission accomplished. We landed on the helipad at Oshakati and were met by the officer commanding Sector 10, Colonel Witkop Badenhorst, who ironically had been my OC when I was at infantry school. He congratulated all of us with a well done, lads. We were so concerned about Brian, we actually forgot about the real reason for the rescue. Aubrey Bell, who by now had crept right back into the back of the tailpiece, before then taking him off the chopper to an awaiting ambulance with Brian. Paula then hauled himself back into his seat. And after Nick had said, "Do we have enough fuel, Paula?" Paula then answered, and I quote, "To hell with that, we'll make it. And anyway, I'm thirsty. Let's get these youngsters back for a beer." He was completely unfazed by the whole event. Obviously, fear not on his list of emotions. We then headed back to Ondangwa, a 6-minute flight away. Still leaking fuel, aircrew happy that we had enough to get home, where we, of course, were greeted with great joy and, of course, sadness for Brian by the entire company. Errol also reminds me I was totally wired, knowing that one of my lads had been hit and that the total hot extraction experience was only just starting to hit home. We met up at the Air Force pub where the rescue was reenacted several times, growing in viciousness and stature at each telling. I insert a slide of the Echo Company leader group celebrating our return. A summary of the incident. Aubrey's ankle healed. 2 vertebrae were fused in his neck, and the feeling in his right arm came back. He eventually returned to combat flying, visiting Umapanda on occasion. He enjoyed a full life and died 5 years ago in Finland at the ripe old age of 80. Here's a slide of Brian in hospital. Brian unfortunately spent the rest of his military service at one military hospital, and today is all fit and well, living in Port Alfred. His father was phoned by someone at one military hospital and told that they would more than likely have to amputate his arm. After pins, plates, and a bone graft, his arm was saved. The plaster was on his arm for approximately 10 arms, and he had it cut off in Civvy Street. His hip wound was described as 250 millimeters long by 100 millimeters wide. The bullet had just missed his leg bone, literally by millimeters. Aubrey, Paula, Sig, Ben, and Brian have all since passed on to greener pastures. Rest in peace, fellow soldiers. Brian lives in Port Alfred. Neil lives in Cape Town. Assie lives in Pretoria. And Errol, well, he was my best man at my wedding 43 years ago. We have remained in contact since. I post a couple of images of our Norris Crooks Parade held in Bloemfontein 2 years later in 1981. There's a slide of my troops and I at the HC Parade. On the left of the one is all the officers and then the NCOs, and then my troops. I've got the picture of the 5 of them, all young men. I have another slide that I include with all the recipients, with the then President P.W. Botha. An interesting note, of the 18 recipients, 10 are paratroopers. There was us 6, and the others are recce's, and 4 are chopper pilots, and 4 are others. The 2 ladies, they received the medals posthumously for their sons. I then include a further slide of our HC group of 8, taken in 1981 at a gathering of recipients the night before receiving our medals. I also found out literally in October of this year that Nick Lithgow, our co-pilot, was awarded the Chief of the South African Defence Force Commendation Medal for his part at a totally separate occasion. I include another slide, a photo of our 30th reunion held in 2009. Inserts of Brown Southey and Ben Maria, who unfortunately both rest in peace. A really, really feel-good moment. We had a 30th year reunion of the incident in October 2009 at my house, where we formally got to meet Aubrey, and he got to meet his rescuers. When I first set up this occasion with his wife Ursula, as he was unavailable, she cried profusely, thanking me and my guys for what we had done. She said life with 2 small kids would have been so totally different, much tougher. It was quite a moving but memorable reunion. She has since asked me for a rendition, and I have duly sent that off to her. so she can give it to her children. Some interesting facts I found out many years later doing research on the rescue. A telegram from Officer Commanding Sector 10, reading as follows. I have two renditions which I will post. Sector 10, top secret. Commanders only, the rescue of Captain Bell. Please pass my best wishes and appreciation to all members of SAF and Parachute Company who conducted the rescue of Captain Bell. The manner in which the rescue effort was put together and the exceptional execution under the most extreme and unfavorable circumstances are a credit to aircrew, paratroopers, and other involved members. Well done. And I have the Afrikaans version of that as well. I also have a propaganda photograph showing SWAPO and MPLA soldiers of what we believe was the remains of Aubrey Bell's Impala, tail number 1033. We're not 100% sure, but we're almost certain because of all the pictures in the rescues. We see most of the planes, but this one is very different. Also from Brian Gibson while recovering in one military hospital. Very interesting. One of the Special Forces operators that went into the Impala SWAPO base the following day looking for the downed plane. He ended up with Brian for some other reason in one military hospital, for something unrelated. And he told Brian that there were approximately 800 soldiers there, and they had cleared out when he had got there for fear of reprisal attacks. I am still not sure of what the outcome could have been. General Dick Lord, a retired Mirage pilot and retired chief of the South African Air Force, wrote a book titled Vlamgat, loosely translated as Burning Tails. And in it he states, 22 aircraft were lost from 1974 to 1989 of varying types. He summarizes, stating that the helicopter fleet received the greatest attention from small arms fire, 12.7 millimeter, 14.5 millimeter, and 23 millimeter anti-aircraft artillery, as well as RPG and SAM-7 missiles. I include a photograph of our Puma's pilot's cockpit and the tail damage. General Dick Lord ends off his book by stating, perhaps the record belongs to Major Paula Kruger, whose Puma returned to Air Force Base Ondangwa, sporting 22 14.5 millimeter bullet holes after rescuing a downed Impala pilot. Nick Lithgow in his book states, on closer inspection of the underbelly of Paula's Puma, I counted nearly 200 AK-47 bullet holes, over and above the 22 14.5 millimeter holes. Whilst Hugh's Puma was not left free, he'd taken a 23 millimeter anti-aircraft bullet in the rear fuselage and had a couple of AK-47 bullet holes. Nick goes further to say of us young parabats, damn, they were good, and all just teenagers doing national service. They were an absolute credit to the youth of our country. And again, a testament to the high standard of training that we received in those days. Thanks, Nick. Not too bad yourselves. We were really a great combination as parabats and blue jobs. Keith Dell, in his book, comments that this was not the first fighter to go down in this area, and that the area was really dangerous, eventually leading our forces to attack and take the town of Ondangwa, moving MPLA and SWAPO further north. A sad anecdote, not so lucky were the 12 A Company paratroopers and 3 Puma Air Force flyers that were taken out mid-air while participating in troop movements during Operation Meerbos on the 9th of August, 1982. A sad day for us paratroopers. I include a photograph of my medals and my HC certificate. My medal is medal number 61 of only 187 that have been awarded to date. Obviously, I have a propatria for operational service, minimum of 55 days. I'm fortunate enough to have a South Africa medal made out of nickel from a Russian T-54 tank and the Angolan flag. General Service Medal for all service that I performed inside South Africa from 1983 onwards. And because of my 10-year service in the conventional reserve, I have a John Chard Medal infantry version. Just for those that are interested, John Chard was a British officer who was awarded the Victoria Cross on the 4th of July, 1879, for his part in the defense of Rorke's on the 23rd of January, 1979. And he is mentioned in two medals, the John Chard Medal and the John Chard Decoration. And they are for both active reserve force. Our motto, no one gets left behind. In closing, can I say, even though we honor one person's deeds, we must always remember that we did not operate alone and in isolation. Many unsung heroes have made it possible for us to be there, and especially in those circumstances. So let us remember all of them, especially those who paid with their lives and received no recognition. I also want to thank everyone who was involved, who contributed their amazing renditions, assisting me to put this accurate account of this rescue. We were the lucky ones. Thank you.
You know, this is normally the time when the applause starts and the beer is given to you to take a breather and things like that. So I start smoking. It's a fantastic story. I sit here and really I have goosebumps. I can even show it to you. And I'm in Thailand, it's damn warm. So for me to get goosebumps, I must have heard something. But of course, at this stage, I have the honor to ask a few questions. And I always do it with an eye on the future, because we don't know when you people are watching here. We might be dead by the time that you're watching here in a few years from now. Cross touch wood, we don't think so, but we don't know the future. I just want to say two historical things I just want to add here before I get to the question sides. Is that in the first place, it's very fascinating when you said to me that the South African medal was made out of these meltdown tanks which were captured, because that was based upon the British system of a Victoria Cross, which the first medal of a Victoria Cross was captured cannons, I think at Balaclava or someplace.
Sebastopol.
Sebastopol.
If my memory serves me correct, Sebastopol.
Correct. Yes, at Balaclava they didn't capture anything, they just lost the light brigade.
Yes.
Fascinating, but Sebastopol, and they used that metal, I think, until the 1950s. And then they had to replace it. So the South Africans had the same idea. Let's use this captured equipment and make something very, very unique. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to bring under your attention is Dick Lord. Now, Dick Lord, I don't know how many of you know this, was actually very heavily involved in creating the Top Gun exercises for the US Navy. And at that stage, he was the brains behind it. At that stage, I think he was flying Phantom 2s for the Royal Navy. And then he came to the South African Air Force, came back home like so many of us of them. But that's the two things I just want to place here, and then we'll get to the question stage. And Tiger, say hello to everybody. For you people who've been watching the show, he was this big when I got him months ago, and now he's like all over the place. But anyway, did your parents perhaps serve in the military, John? Were they totally unfamiliar with the military when you got called up, or were they perhaps part of a different generation?
My father died when I was 18, so I hadn't even gone into the army. I think I was writing matric when he died. He died in December 76. My mother, she was like probably 90%, 95% of the mothers. Their sons went off to serve God knows where, why, how. And yeah, she really, I think she did attend my becoming an officer in Oudtshoorn, and she was at my wings parade. But when I went off to serve, she had very little input whatsoever. They like I think all the parents at that stage of our involvement, very few actually knew what was going on. And I must be quite honest. I think this is, if she listens to this, this is going to be the first time that she will actually hear the story from front to back. She's got an idea. She was at the parade where I got the medal. Yeah, it's 10
Well,
out
we
of
must,
10 for our folks.
we must congratulate her for having raised a wonderful son, and I'm sorry about your dad's early death. That's not easy. And the other thing which could not have been that easy for you is arriving at Bloemfontein of all places, which is the most Afrikaans place in the entire South Africa. Well, we can argue about that. But I'll say this to you, you speak English in Bloemfontein even today, they pick up a shotgun or a stone or something to do something with you. They don't really do the English thing there. So how was that? How did that work out for you, especially in the army?
You know, being English in the South African Army, I think was tough. But you know what? We were, I think, above and beyond that. We got on with the task at hand. And as you'll see, most of my troops that were with me that day, they were English-speaking guys. Nick Lithgow's English. So, you know what? We all gave our pound of flesh. And I would like to believe that the English didn't let that worry them. Certain of the Afrikaners took umbrage, but you know what? Get over it, guys. We're here. The World War is long, long gone. We were there. We fought next to the Afrikaner, and you know what? I'm a South African, not English, not Afrikaans. I'm a South African.
You know, even in the police, we had that problem. The Kofoed unit, Zulu Echo, I believe, was fairly English, while the rest of them were fairly Afrikaans. Now, I'm not sure how that Kofoed unit, or group rather, how they spoke to the Ovambos and the Portuguese special constables. Probably they had to speak a mixture of Afrikaans and Ovambo and English, but people moved on. You know, you're quite right. We're all South Africans. But I want to ask something about the PT course, as you call it, at the parachute battalion, because there might be some people here who don't quite get what you're saying. Am I correct if I say that's a 14 days of hell, of like a selection before you go on the paratrooper jump course?
Yeah, it's a 2-week phase of which you spend 5 days of the first week and 5 days of the second week. Absolutely intense PT. You do absolutely unbelievable stuff. You do rifle PT, you pick your buddy up, you run, you carry poles, you carry a 35-kilogram marble with you. They absolutely, on my course, I can recall, I think we started out with a number of 600 was the start. And I think we finished off with about 108, 120 roundabout. And out of that, we had to try and make, you know, a full-sized parachute company. So yes, a lot of guys didn't make it. The tests themselves, they're tough. It jolts my memory about some of the amazing, and yes, I know I made it. I was in actual fact, I was very fit. But there are people that come to mind. I mean, Rowan Winter, probably the smallest paratrooper that I've ever known. I mean, he can't be bigger than 2 bricks and a tikkie high. And with loaded kit, rifle, he cleared the wall. And let me tell you, that is no mean feat. For guys as tall as me, not a problem. But for a guy like him, so it's those sort of things that take my mind back to some of the amazing, strong. You don't have to be big. You don't have to be strong. It's the paratrooper is a mindset. You go through that. I firmly believe you've got pretty much the cream of the crop. I know the recce's, they do the PD course, and then of course they do their special phases. Yeah, I give them 10 out of 10, but I think we're a pretty close 9 out of 10, you know. And that is why we are a really close bunch of guys. It's a brotherhood. It's an unbelievable brotherhood. I really can't say much more than that. The PD course, of course, does lend itself to that. It's you. Everything you do is done as a group. So if one guy falls, you have to pick him up. He's got to come to the end. And so as a team, as buddies, as a grouping, that is what you do. It's just the way it is. Hence why I say in my talk, no one gets left behind. You just don't. I have never ever even, we wouldn't consider it. You just don't leave any of your mates behind. Well, in this case, we didn't even leave a pilot who I didn't even know. If I had to do it today, yeah, probably a lot slower, weigh a little bit more, but I won't leave the guy behind.
I recall we were speaking to the paratrooper General McGill Alexander, and he also said that wall almost got him. And he had to go at night, he had spent some time in prayer. And then the next day he went over that wall like you can't believe. That wall is something of a legend. When I record the Paratrooper Museum in Bloemfontein in a month or two from now, I will definitely see if they will allow me just to take a picture of that wall so that people can understand what you people are talking about.
Yes.
But that reminds me of something. You said that you walked about 85 kilometers of Ops Meerbos.
No, that was Smoke Shell. That was Smoke Shell.
Smoke Shell, my apologies. How long did it take you guys to walk that? Because the sand is soft. It's not the easy place to walk. It's like a beach, mostly.
Well, I use the analogy, the top section of the beach, not the watered section. That very top section where you walk down to the beach, that thick, gluggy, hot sand. That is what the whole of the border area actually looks like. So, you know, I'm proud to have been a South African soldier in that. Even our infantry units, they all had to walk in that. And let me tell you, to walk in that, you had to be so fit. You had to be so disciplined. Because I think the youngsters of today, hell, I'm not walking in this, and I think they would have bolted back. But the guys did it, every single one of them. And they stuck to their tasks. No, it was tough. And don't forget, it was red hot. Always hot. And of course, you know who's in front of you. Somebody who wants to kill you. They don't play games with you. You're not going there to play cards. He's out to kill you. So you're wide awake. You've got to be fit. You've got to be disciplined. And of course, the leader group, you know, they always say the lieutenants don't keep direction well. Well, they pretty much get to their destinations every single time. That's all I could say.
Yes, I remember General Borman of the Special Forces said an infantryman is something you hang things onto. And he started laughing when he said that, but it is totally true. He seemed to load these people ridiculously and even more today. I recall in my training in the police counterinsurgency unit, we had some Rhodesians there. And they would tell us, look guys, when you go operational, just drop the skid as much as you can, just half it, and then half it again. I'm not sure how that maths work. I mean, if you half something twice, you have nothing left. Isn't that true?
Oh no,
I
those
asked all of
maps.
them and I started doing a lot of push-ups afterwards, so then I stopped asking. But any of you guys out there with no maths, man, tell me, if I half something and I half it again, do I have 0 or do I have something left? I don't know, guys. I studied law, not this.
Worse,
Do you know?
as a young 19-year-old lieutenant who gets given a photo map, I can vouch for. You have to send somebody up a tree. There are no reference points. If you're on the western side, you've at least got some hills. But believe me, that entire middle section of Angola is as flat as a pancake. There's no way you say, okay, fine, we're going to march there. You believe 100% in your compass. If it says you're walking on that, you walk on that. And you count the paces, because there's no, and you can get yourself lost there. I don't know how the enemy do it, but you know what? They used to bombshell and split and go. And I'll tell you what, they kept us on our toes.
Now I want to ask you something a bit more serious. You were treating the wounded paratrooper yourself.
Yes.
Did at some stage you get specially trained medics to go with you? Or was this normal that you would be there without specialist medics?
You know, I think I was in the early days of the SADF, you know, the 75, 76, 77, 78, 79. I'm not 100% sure of how the 7 meds and all that fitted into the thing, but we didn't. We didn't have that. We had our own, what we called a Falk medic. The Falk medic wasn't on the chopper that day. So, yeah, that was pretty much off the cuff stuff, you know. I recall doing a little bit at Pelanomi in Bloemfontein. We went on what they called a first aid course. Couple of stitches, give a couple of tablets, you know, malaria tablets and that sort of thing. But nothing really, I don't even think we did CPR. So the little bit that we did with Brian, and I mean, I had Neil in the chopper with us. And I think between all of us, somehow we either kept Brian comfortable, or one gave a round, one lifted his leg, one, you know, helped me bandage him. Yeah, there's not much space in the chopper. So we were all intimately involved. The machine gun, and obviously it takes up a lot of the inside of the chopper. So there's not much room. It really can only hold the 6 of us. And of course, you know, the pilot. I don't really recall the specifics of it. All I know is the poor lad was in unbelievable pain. I knew that we had to get just give him a Sosagon or 2. I think we gave him 2, maybe even 3, just to make it a little bit easy for him. I don't even remember how long the flight back was, but there was this really silence in the chopper. And I think it was the shock of what had happened, where we'd been, then what had happened to Brian. Brian and Neil and Brian Southey, they were very, very big friends outside of the military. They played rugby against each other and all that sort of thing. So they probably had a closer bond. And of course, the five guys, the 5 troops, the troops, they live together, and you know, they have their own bond. I was the loot, you know. Business-like, I suppose that's the way it is, you know. But I mean, the finest young men, I mean, I was a year older than them. They were like we were the same, you know. And I think they would have done the same for me.
I have no doubts about that. I want to ask you about that picture of a Dakota flying behind you. I suppose you jumped out of that aircraft many, many times.
Just a few times, yeah. This is a painting that Nick Grobler, a much older paratrooper than me, did. I don't know. I am almost of the opinion that virtually every paratrooper has that photo in their house, either that or the C-130. But yes, I've been fortunate enough to have jumped out of that. I've jumped out of a C-130 a few times. I've done some operational jumps, night jumps. I've had one occasion where we were shot at hanging from a parachute. Good luck to the man who can shoot someone while he's in the air. That'll take some doing. But yes, had an unbelievable experience. Parachute battalion, absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. The comrades, the brotherhood, awesome. And of course, my troops, we still have reunions. We have a group. We're in touch on a fairly regular basis. Yeah, and looking forward to the next reunion, which I think is a year away or something.
I have a question about that. I was asking it with a specific reason, because we had a fellow here called Walter Weiss. And Captain Walter Weiss was a SAF pilot, and he was flying the Dakota C-47. He says there's no such thing as a DC-3 in the SAF. But as far as I can see, it's the same damn aircraft. It's just the floor is strengthened. And Walter Weiss says, while he was dropping you people, he noticed that the paratroopers would all try to touch the horizontal stabilizers at the back, the little wings at the back, all trying to touch it. Now I don't understand his fury, because when you do a static line jump, you're supposed to pull your head in and put your arms on your reserve chute and put your legs together in the virgin position. And that's how you go out. How can you even reach out to touch the damn thing unless you try to do it with your head, which I won't put above you. So how did that
There's no way on God's green earth that you're going to do that. Absolutely not. But being paratroopers, they're told how to do the drills. But paratroopers, that's why they're paratroopers. They're going to do things however they feel like doing it. But touch that, they will never do that. At least not in my experiences. But naughty boys, they are the best.
He did say they couldn't do it, and then he went into a very technical explanation about wind stream and I don't know what else. Very fascinating thing, but I'm glad. I have a last question for you. I'm told by all the paratroopers I speak to that those parachute wings on your chest do something for the ladies of Bloemfontein and beyond. Truth or false?
Well, let's put it this way. They do two things. If you're in the armor with a black beret, they incite the black beret boys, and I think they're brilliant, the black beret boys. Don't get me wrong. 6-1 Mech and those guys, brilliant. I have some really good friends. But those wings, they incite the black beret boys. They list for the paratroopers. They just want a box. And I've been party to that on a few occasions, with and without my troops. I do have my own black beret as well that I went and fetched. But to answer the first part, yeah, look, the girls love it. I don't know whether it's the wings that they love or the red beret or Piet Breebors. When you wear those wings, your chest just goes up so much more. I get goosebumps thinking about it. You really toil to put those wings on your chest. And once they're on your chest, you can't take them off. And all the ladies, they love it. The lady that loved my wings, I'm still married to her now 44 years later.
Well, it reminds me of something which RSM James Tytger once said to me. He said, look, I don't, and he sounded very puzzled. He said, I don't understand why a woman wouldn't like a special forces person or a paratrooper. There's so much to like.
Absolutely.
Yeah, John, this was fantastic, man. Thank you so much. May I ask you, is it possible if somebody invite you after seeing this or not, for you to go and tell this fascinating tale for us in person somewhere.
It took a while for me to put pen to paper and to obviously structure the talk in such a way that it is of interest. But I would have no objection. I'm actually quite comfortable now. I think I've done it. I've done 8 or 9 talks. And I'm so grateful to you that I could do it on legacy conversations. My mom, for starters, is going to be able to hear it. I've got 2 younger brothers. They'll also hear it from the horse's mouth. And yeah, it'll remain for posterity. And yes, if I can do the talk for whoever, it will be only too great. I'm comfortable with talking about it now. At the time, it was, wow, man, what the hell have you done? And when you're young, you don't really realize the impetus that it has. It was pretty much, we did our job. Right place, right time, or wrong place, wrong time. However it's perceived, we got a medal out of the deal. We didn't go there to get medals. We went there to save Aubrey, or to save a pilot. It wasn't even Aubrey. So yes, I would gladly do the talk again.
Well, that's fantastic news. I'm going to leave contact details here in the description and also here on the screen.
Okay.
We're at the end of this episode, but there's a standing invitation for you, John. When you're finished with your book, please come back to us. And you're always welcome to come back anyway. And that's it. That is our story for today. As we say at Legacy, until we meet again, God bless you.
Thank you very much, Koos. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Ex alto vincimus.
Yeah. That, by the way, I think is a paratrooper's motto. What would that be in the decent Queen's English?
We conquer from above.
And they bloody well did. I can tell you, they have a proud history. And in a future episode, we're going to show you the museum as well in Bloemfontein.
Oh, fantastic.
So guys,
I think if you look just outside the NCO's pub, there is a scroll of honor. And I think I stand corrected. I'd love you maybe to take a photograph and send it to me. But I know from one parachute battalion, I know reconnaissance commando, the various commandos, there's a lot of Honoris Cruxes. But one parachute battalion, I think, has got 7 Honoris Cruxes and 1 low weapon medal. So not bad.
it's more than not bad. I can tell you in the South African military, you just don't get medals. It is really hard to get medals there. It is not like other forces where you see a guy is 25 years old and overweight and he has about 15 different medals on his chest. It just doesn't work like that in the South African military. It just doesn't. And I think most of our Honoris Cruxes were anyway posthumous, what do you call it?
A lot of them are posthumous.
Posthumous is the word, yes.
Yeah.
Sadly so.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.